Gather round the fire, friends, under a sky blazing with stars. Welcome to Tales of the Untamed West, where the spirit of the frontier burns bright. Tonight we weave a tale of courage, hope, and mystery. A Navajo folk tale set in the heart of the Wild West, inspired by the wisdom of the Diné people. Meet Tawa, a young Navajo boy led by a mysterious black crow on a journey that would echo through the ages. They called it the Song of the Wandering Crow, a story of a boy, a bird, and a desert that tested the soul. If you love Native American legends and Wild West adventures, hit that subscribe button and let's ride into this epic tale together. Keep the fire burning and let's begin. In the year 1865, the Navajo lands of the American Southwest stretched wide under a relentless sun. Nestled between towering red cliffs and golden dunes lay a small village, its earthen hogans blending into the desert like they'd grown from the earth itself. The air carried the scent of sage and wood smoke, and the faint bleating of sheep echoed through the canyons. Here lived Tawa, a boy of 14 summers, with curious eyes that sparkled like the stars and a heart heavy with dreams. The village was a place of resilience. Its people, the Diné, bound by stories and songs passed down through generations. Women ground corn, their hands moving in rhythm to chants that honored the earth. Men guided sheep to patches of dry grass, their staffs tapping the ground. Children played with sticks and stones, their laughter a fleeting defiance of the hardships that loomed. Tawa's family lived in a hogan near the cliffs, where his mother, Sunny, wove blankets with patterns of stars and mountains, her fingers steady despite the worry in her eyes. His father, Hastian, a hunter known for his skill with a bow, carved wooden toys for the children, including a small horse that Tawa cherished, a gift from his infancy. Every evening, the village gathered around a fire, the elders sharing tales under a sky ablaze with constellations. Tawa's grandmother, Kaylee, was the heart of these gatherings. Her silver hair glowed in the firelight, and her woven shawl seemed to hold the wisdom of the ages. She spoke of the ancestors, of spirits that walked the land, and of a black crow, known as the Wandering Crow. "That crow," she'd say, her voice soft as the wind, "carries the whispers of the spirits. It guides lost souls through the untamed frontier. If it calls to you, Tawa, you must listen." But the year 1865 brought a shadow darker than any tale. The rains failed to come, and the sun scorched the earth, drying streams and withering cornfields. The sheep grew thin, their wool patchy, and the children's laughter faded. Tawa watched his mother ration water, her hands trembling as she poured drops into a clay cup. His father sat by the fire each night, his once steady hands idle, his face etched with worry. The elders chanted under the stars, their voices rising in prayers to the holy people for rain, but the sky remained a cruel, endless blue. The village had endured hardship before. Kaylee often spoke of the long walk when the Navajo were forced from their lands by soldiers in 1864, marching hundreds of miles to a barren reservation. Many perished, but the Diné returned, their spirit unbroken. "We are still here," Kaylee would say, "because the spirits never left us." Yet this drought tested even their resolve. One evening, as the village shared a meager meal of flatbread and dried mutton, Kaylee pulled Tawa aside. "The spirits are testing us," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the fire. "But they always leave a path, even in the darkest times. Keep your eyes open, Tawa, and your heart brave." That night, Tawa lay in his hogan, his stomach rumbling, and dreamed of a black crow soaring over a desert shimmering with water. The dream felt like a promise, a spark of hope in the darkness. The next morning, Tawa woke before dawn, the air already warm with the promise of another scorching day. He slipped out of the hogan, clutching his wooden horse, and climbed the hill above the village, a place where he often sought solace. The red cliffs loomed like silent guardians, and the dunes stretched endlessly before him, a sea of gold under a pale sky. As he sat on a flat rock, tracing the horse's carved mane, a sharp, echoing call pierced the silence, a sound that seemed to speak his name. Tawa looked up, his heart skipping a beat. There, circling above, was a black crow, its feathers gleaming like polished stone, its eyes sharp and knowing. It landed on a nearby rock, tilting its head as if studying him, and called again, a cry that stirred something deep within Tawa's soul. He remembered Kaylee's stories, the wandering crow, messenger of the spirits, guide to the lost. The crow spread its wings and flew toward the desert, glancing back as if beckoning him to follow. Tawa froze, his mind racing. The desert was a place of peril. Rattlesnakes slithered in the shadows, bandits roamed the dunes, and the sun could kill a boy in a single day. Yet he saw his mother's trembling hands, his father's worried eyes, and the children too weak to play. The village was dying, its lifeblood draining with every parched day. The crow called a third time, its voice clear and urgent, and Tawa felt a fire ignite in his chest. He could not sit idle while his people suffered. He ran back to the village, his bare feet kicking up dust, and found Kaylee weaving a basket by her hogan. "Grandmother," he gasped, "the wandering crow called to me. It wants me to follow." Kaylee's eyes sharpened, her hands pausing. "The crow knows things we cannot see," she said, "but the desert is no place for a boy alone. If you go, you must be brave, Tawa." She handed him a small pouch of cornmeal, a sacred offering, to the earth, and a woven blanket to shield him from the sun. Then, from her hogan, she pulled a clay pendant shaped like a crow, strung on a leather cord. "Wear this," she said, tying it around his neck. "It will remind you of the spirits and of home." Tawa hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of her embrace, a tether to the village he might never see again. He stopped by his hogan to bid farewell to his parents, his mother's eyes filled with tears. But she pressed her forehead to his. "Come back to us, my son," she whispered, her voice breaking. His father placed a hand on Tawa's shoulder, his grip firm. "You're braver than you know," he said, handing him a sturdy wooden staff carved with simple lines. "Let it guide your steps." Tawa stood at the edge of the village, the crow circling above, its wings cutting through the dawn. He looked back at the worried faces of his people, Sonny's trembling hands, Hastian's steady gaze, Kaylee's quiet strength. With a deep breath, he took his first step into the desert, the pendant warm against his chest. The crow's call, a beacon in the unknown. The journey of the wandering crow had begun. The desert stretched before Tawa like an endless ocean, its dunes shimmering under a merciless sun. He walked for hours, his feet burning on the hot sand, his blanket wrapped tightly around his shoulders. The crow flew ahead, its black wings, a stark contrast against the golden sky, calling every so often as if to say, "Keep going, Tawa." He clutched his staff, the cornmeal pouch tied to his waist, and whispered to himself, "I'll find water for my village. I have to." The first trial came before noon, as a gust of wind roared across the dunes, carrying a wall of sand that stung Tawa's face like 1,000 tiny needles. He dropped to his knees, pulling the blanket over his head, coughing as sand filled his lungs. The storm howled like a pack of wolves, the world reduced to a blur of dust and fury. Tawa's heart pounded, fear clawing at him. Would he be buried alive? The crow landed nearby, its feathers ruffled but its eyes calm, as if urging him to endure. He thought of the children, their frail bodies waiting for water, and gripped his staff tighter. "The desert tests the brave," he repeated, Kaylee's words echoing in his mind. When the wind finally died, Tawa stood, brushing sand from his blanket, his throat dry but his resolve unbroken. The crow took flight again, leading him onward, through a landscape of cracked earth and jagged rocks. By midday, Tawa's water skin was nearly empty, each sip a precious treasure. He rested on a flat rock, wiping sweat from his brow, when a sharp rattle froze his blood. A rattlesnake, its scales blending with the sand, coiled just steps away, its tail vibrating in warning. Tawa's hands trembled, his staff useless against such a foe. He'd seen snakes take down sheep, their venom swift and deadly. The crow swooped down, landing between Tawa and the snake, flapping its wings and calling loudly. The snake hissed, its fangs bared, but the crow held its ground, a fierce guardian. After a tense moment, the snake slithered away, vanishing into the dunes. Tawa exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you," he said, realizing the crow was more than a guide. It was a protector, a spirit bound to his fate. As the afternoon burned on, a new sound sent a shiver through Tawa, a low, haunting howl that echoed across the desert. On a ridge above stood a lone wolf, its gray fur shimmering in the heat, its yellow eyes fixed on him. Tawa stepped back, his foot slipping on a loose rock, and the wolf growled, baring its teeth. He'd heard his father's stories of wolves hunting in packs, their hunger relentless. This one was alone, its ribs visible but no less dangerous. The crow circled above, calling sharply, as if warning the wolf to stay back. Tawa's hand went to the cornmeal pouch, a symbol of peace and strength. He tossed a handful toward the wolf, whispering, "I mean no harm." The wolf sniffed the offering, its growl softening, and after a long moment it turned and loped away, disappearing. Behind the ridge, Tawa's hands shook, but he looked at the crow, now perched nearby. "You're teaching me," he said, his voice steadier, "to be brave." The trials of the desert had forged something new in Tawa, a courage he hadn't known he possessed. Yet the sun still blazed, and the path ahead was long. He adjusted his blanket, tightened his grip on the staff, and followed the crow deeper into the wilderness, the pendant warm against his heart. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tawa spotted a faint trail of smoke rising from the dunes. The crow flew toward it, and Tawa followed, his heart lifting with hope. Perhaps it was a spring or a camp with water to share. His legs ached, his throat burned, but the crow's call kept him moving, a promise of salvation in the unforgiving desert. As he crested a dune, he saw a small encampment. 3 men and a woman, their wagons stuck. In the sand, their faces etched with weariness. These were settlers, outsiders to the Navajo, their clothes dusty and worn from a long journey west. Tawa had heard tales of settlers who took land, water, even lives, their greed a shadow over the frontier. He crouched behind a rock, his breath shallow, watching as the men argued over a tattered map, their voices rough with frustration. The woman, older, sat on a crate, mending a torn shirt with steady hands, her face calm despite the chaos. The crow landed on Tawa's shoulder, its feathers brushing his cheek, and called softly as if to say, "Be brave." Tawa's stomach twisted. He was alone, far from home, with nothing but a staff and a near-empty water skin. Yet the crow's presence steadied him, a reminder of the spirits watching over him. He took a deep breath and stepped into the open, holding his staff tightly. "Hello," he called, his voice small but clear. The settlers turned, their hands reaching for knives glinting in the fading light. The woman spoke first, her voice sharp but not unkind. "Who are you, boy?" Tawa swallowed hard, the pendant warm against his chest. "I'm Tawa, from the Navajo village," he said. "I'm looking for water. My people are thirsty." The men exchanged glances, and one, a tall man with a scarred cheek named Amos, laughed harshly. "Water out here? You're as lost as we are, kid." But the woman, Eliza, stood, brushing dust from her skirt. She walked to the wagon and pulled out a small canteen half full of water. "Take it," she said, handing it to Tawa. "We've got a little to spare, but you'd best turn back. The desert's no place for a boy." Tawa took the canteen, his hands trembling with gratitude. He drank a small sip, the water cool against his parched throat, and saved the rest for his journey. "Thank you," he said, bowing his head, "but I can't turn back. The wandering crow is leading me to water from my village." The settlers looked at the crow, now perched on a nearby cactus, its eyes glinting in the firelight. Amos snorted. "A bird? You'll die out here." But Eliza smiled faintly. "Maybe he's got more sense than we do," she murmured. That night, the settlers invited Tawa to share their fire. He sat with them, the flames casting shadows on their faces, and listened to their story. They were heading west, seeking a new home after losing their farm to debt. Their wagon wheel had broken and their supplies were dwindling, yet they shared what little they had. Tawa offered a handful of cornmeal from his pouch, a gesture of thanks, and they mixed it with dried meat to make a simple stew. Eliza spoke of her childhood, of a crow that once led her lost dog home. "Maybe your crow knows something we don't," she said, her voice kind. As Tawa lay under the stars, the crow perched above, its eyes like twin moons. He thought of his village, of the faces he'd left behind, and felt a warmth despite the cold desert night. The settlers' kindness, unexpected and pure, reminded him that even in the untamed West, humanity could shine. He touched the clay, pendant, its weight a promise of home, and drifted to sleep, ready for the trials ahead. At dawn, Tawa bid farewell to the settlers, their wave a small beacon in the vast desert. The crow took flight, leading him deeper into the wilderness, its wings cutting through the morning haze. Tawa's steps were lighter now, the canteen from Eliza, a lifeline. But the desert's dangers were far from over. The air grew cooler as he approached a narrow canyon, its red walls rising like sentinels. But a new threat loomed on the horizon. As Tawa crossed a rocky plain, the ground trembled with hoofbeats. A lone rider appeared, his horse kicking up dust, his figure cloaked in a tattered duster coat. A bandit, one of the outlaws who haunted the frontier, preying on travelers with no mercy. His bandana hid half his face, but his eyes were cold, and a revolver glinted at his hip. Tawa's heart pounded, his staff trembling in his hands. He was no match for an armed man, and the desert offered no cover. "Got any water, kid?" the bandit growled, his voice rough as gravel. "Hand it over, or you won't see sundown." Tawa clutched the canteen, his only hope for the journey back. To lose it was to doom his village. The crow dove from the sky, screeching and flapping at the bandit's face, its talons grazing his hat. The horse reared, snorting in panic, and the bandit cursed, swatting at the bird with his free hand. "Damn crow!" he shouted, his revolver wavering. Tawa seized the moment, his legs moving before his mind caught up. He sprinted toward a cluster of boulders, his breath ragged, the pendant bouncing against his chest. A gunshot cracked, the bullet striking the ground near his feet, sending up a puff of dust. Tawa dove behind a boulder, his heart racing, the crow circling above, calling sharply as if urging him to stay hidden. The bandit fired again, the echo reverberating through the desert, but the crow's relentless assault, diving, screeching, kept him off balance. The horse bucked, and the bandit, frustrated, cursed and spurred it away, his hoofbeats fading into the distance. Tawa slumped against the boulder, his hands shaking, the canteen still clutched tightly. "You saved me again," he whispered to the crow, now perched on a nearby rock, its eyes glinting with something like pride. The desert had tested him with storms, snakes, and wolves, but this was different. A human threat, born of greed and desperation. Yet the crow, a spirit of the Diné, had stood with him, its wings a shield against the darkness. He stood, adjusting his blanket, and looked at the canyon ahead. The crow took flight, its call a beacon once more. Tawa's fear lingered, but so did his resolve. The village was counting on him, their faces etched in his mind. Sonny's trembling hands, Hastian's quiet strength, Kaylee's unwavering faith. He tightened his grip on the staff and followed the crow, the pendant a steady pulse against his heart, ready to face whatever lay beyond the canyon's walls. The canyon loomed before Tawa, its red walls casting cool shadows that offered respite from the sun's wrath. The crow flew ahead, its wings brushing the stone, until it landed on a jagged rock near a cluster of green shrubs, plants that defied the desert's barrenness. Tawa's heart raced, his steps quickening. The air felt different here, fresher, alive with a faint dampness that whispered of hope. Could this be the place the crow had led him to all along? He ran to the rock, his staff tapping the ground, and stopped, breathless. There, seeping from the stone, was a trickle of water, clear as glass, pooling in a shallow basin. a hidden spring, a miracle tucked away in the heart of the desert, its surface shimmering like a gift from the holy people. Tawa dropped to his knees, cupping the water in his hands and drinking deeply. It tasted sweet, like the first rain after a long drought. And he laughed, the sound echoing through the canyon, a release of fear and doubt. "You led me here," he whispered to the crow, its black eyes shining with a quiet wisdom. "You saved my village." The crow called softly as if to say, "Not yet." Tawa understood. He had to bring the water back to guide his people to this spring. He filled his water skin, the cool liquid splashing over his hands, and tied it securely to his waist. The pendant glowed warm against his chest, a reminder of Kaylee's words. The spirits always leave a path. The journey back was swifter, as if the desert itself had softened under Tawa's feet. He walked through the heat, his steps light, the precious water sloshing in his skin. The crow flew overhead, a constant guide, its wings catching the light of a setting sun. As he passed the settlers' tracks, now fading in the dunes, he whispered a wish for their safe journey west, their kindness a spark in his heart. When the red cliffs of his village appeared, the sky was ablaze with gold and purple. The crow circled, calling loudly, and the villagers ran out, children first, their eyes wide, then the elders, and finally Tawa's parents. Sunny dropped her basket, her cry of relief echoing as she pulled Tawa into a fierce hug. "You're safe," she sobbed, her tears wetting his cheek. Hastian's eyes shone with pride, his hand heavy on Tawa's shoulder. "My son," he said, his voice thick. "I found water," Tawa said, holding up the water skin. "The wandering crow led me to a spring in a canyon. There's enough for everyone." The villagers gathered, their faces lighting with hope. Hastian took the water skin, drinking a sip and passing it to the elders, their murmurs of thanks rising like a song. The next day, the men followed Tawa to the canyon, carrying clay jars and woven baskets. The spring flowed steadily, a quiet miracle that greened the cornfields and strengthened the sheep. That night, the village held a celebration, the fire blazing high, its flames dancing under the stars. Women brought roasted corn and flatbread. Men played drums, their rhythm a heartbeat of joy. Children danced, their laughter filling the air, and the elders sang to the holy people, their voices weaving a tapestry of gratitude. Sunny wove Tawa a new blanket, patterned with a crow, and draped it over his shoulders. "For bringing us hope," she said, her eyes shining. Hastian handed him the wooden horse, its wood worn smooth. "You're a man now," he said, "a man who saved his people." Kaylee beckoned Tawa to the fire, her shawl glowing. "You listen to the crow," she said. "It's the wind, the spirits, our hearts. You found courage, kindness, and the strength of the Diné." Years later, Tawa, now a man, sat on the hill where he'd first seen the wandering crow, his children at his side. He told them of his journey, of storms, snakes, wolves, and outlaws, of settlers' kindness and a spring that saved their people. "The spirits are always with us," he said, pointing to the sky. "You just have to listen." On quiet nights, he'd hear a familiar call and look up to see a black crow circling, its wings catching the moonlight, a reminder of the journey. That shaped him. And that, friends, is the song of the wandering crow. I hope Tawa's tale lit a spark in your heart, a flame of courage and hope. If it did, leave a comment. Would you have followed the crow's call? What's the bravest thing you've ever done? Subscribe to Tales of the Untamed West for more Wild West stories and Native American legends. If you saw our shorts, when Tawa heard the crow, faced an outlaw, or found the spring, thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep the fire burning, and may the spirits guide your path.